Jamal Adams has been holding in throughout all of training camp, finally signs a 4-year, $70 million extension with the Seattle Seahawks. It has incentives to push up to $72 million, and he gets $38 million guaranteed, which is first among safeties. He gets a $20 million signing bonus, so he has $21 million guaranteed at signing, which is also first among safeties. 17.5 average annual value. What are your initial thoughts, Toaster?
It's a big jump from the safety that reset the market earlier this offseason in Simmons. Yeah. It's 15% greater. I understand that Jamal's a little bit different of a player, but I'm not sure that he's worth that jump in pay. And it's going to be interesting for the safety market moving forward after this, when people start to compare their actual, safety play versus his linebacker play and how teams evaluate that and how players themselves evaluate that.
Yeah. So Simmons, just for reference, is making $15.25 million a year average annual value. Adams is now 17.5. And I think you just kind of hit it on the head. It's really, it's what Jamal Adams does that's different. That, yes, he's technically a safety, but getting in this linebacker conversation fits really with his skill set, which is what he ultimately wanted. As of right now, top-end linebackers are making a lot more than top-end safeties. His teammate Bobby Wagner is making $18 million a year, and I think that was kind of his cap, realistically. And him
got to maintain the hierarchy in the NFL, and we say linebackers are greater than safeties. We can't pay our safety more than our linebacker. I think that's exactly what the Seahawks were willing to die on that hill for.
Right. And, you look at Adams' game, and he's a very unique player. He had 9.5 sacks last season, which was the most ever for a defensive back since they started recording sacks in 1982. He's without a doubt a playmaker, right? Like, he's a difference maker, but he leaves something to be desired from a coverage standpoint. And given that he is still technically classified as a safety and he will line up most of the time in a safety-ish position, I don't know. How do you feel about that value for that type of player?
I'm much more of a consistency-based person. I get that those splash plays can potentially be game-changing, but I prefer the guy that capped into the backfield, and I can trust him to break up passes, anything, the side-to-side coverage. It's awesome to have somebody that can come into the box, get a safety or get a sack here and there, but it's still, it's 10 sacks. That's not something to laugh at. But if that's at a compromise of giving up a 20-yard, 30-yard reception every once in a while, I'm not sure that that's the trade-off that I ultimately want. And the balance may not quite be there for me. To risk it on a player like that or a style like that is fun as it is to watch as a fan.
Yeah, and I think from a Seahawks fan standpoint, you're probably looking at Jamal in the same way that you would have looked at Cam Chancellor, right? Like safety playing more towards the line of scrimmage. Cam didn't, obviously nobody's had the sack numbers that Jamal had, but I think they kind of let Jamal loose on the quarterback a little bit more than, maybe they would have if they would have done that with Cam. Maybe Cam puts up these numbers too. But I think like what Cam did was so much more valuable for them. He wasn't necessarily like a backfield, player the way that Jamal Adams is, just trying to get to the quarterback all the time. He still offered value in coverage, even though he was up closer to the line of scrimmage, but he was like sideline to sideline.
Ball hawk. Yeah. You could count on to be around the ball.
Always. And it's not to say that Jamal isn't around the ball quite a bit. I mean, he is.
He's making a ton of tackles. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just think as the league evolves, we're realizing now, like, oh yeah, safeties actually are, more valuable. They were always considered like behind corners, which they still are, but you're realizing that over the top coverage, that ability to limit big plays is really what keeps you in games in today's NFL with the way the rules are skewed so far towards the offense. And unless Jamal fundamentally changes the way that he plays the game, I, I just don't know. I don't like paying him this amount. I don't know. It seems a little high for me, but they had to do it. They traded 2 first-round picks for him.
Yeah, their hands were tied, and they had to know this going in. This is, I know we have a running Jets gonna jet segment, but this was the Jets realizing that in order to not jet, they needed to jettison him to another team, and they played this one perfectly because that's a lot of money to pay for somebody that's not impactful on every single play, which, when you talk about a defensive lineman, a linebacker, cornerback, they're guaranteed to be impactful on just about every play, right? I mean, some of your best cornerbacks are people that don't get the ball thrown to them the entire game, and that's successful, right? I would love for somebody to have 1 interception, 15 pass breakups, and a 20% completion percentage against them. That's the cornerback that I want, and you don't get that as a safety. And to pay him that kind of money, the cap situation is going to be a little precarious for them long term if they do hold on to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, the first couple of years of this are pretty manageable, I think, for them. But then the final, so looking at this 4 years on top of his current year, the last 3 years of their control over him here gets a little dicey from a cap standpoint. And if he's not performing, you're in a tough spot. They can get out of it, without too much damage done. Ultimately, I think after the 3rd year,
after 2023,
yeah, 2023. But was this a better option for them than, I guess, calling his bluff on not playing and potentially franchising him in the offseason?
So the problem is that I think that he was going to reset the market regardless, and he was going to dig in to say, if I don't get my game check for 2-3 games, I'm actually going to come out ahead because I'm going to get 2-3 million more than Simmons is getting right now, and he proved that already. So at this point, at least they've got him on the field, and he's happy resetting the market. And who knows, maybe the Seahawks are ahead of the game here, and he starts becoming, you're not shadowing your QB with the linebacker anymore. You're shadowing it with the safety, because that's the league's going to a more dynamic. We saw it in week 1 of the preseason that there was a ton of time to throw in the pocket off these naked QB bootlegs, and maybe that's what Jamal dictates, right? You don't get to run a naked bootleg to his side anymore because he will jack you up.
Yeah, but I think what we're seeing as far as a defensive trend in the league now, like with Fangio, with Staley, with that tree, Sean Desai is a Fangio disciple in Chicago, and what those defenses are doing they're going too high. And, the Legion of Boom, that 2013 Seahawks team, that cover 3 that they ran with Sherman locking down a third of the field, like, teams are shifting away from that. They're getting to like this too high shell that they can, move out of, right? Like essentially you can roll into a cover 3 from that, but starting in too high and working to eliminate big plays that way. And Jamal, in his nature as an aggressive player, he's going to make big plays for defense, but he's also going to create big plays for the offense every once in a while too. Right. And as the league continues to shift that direction, and maybe Pete moves on and they have a new coach that comes in and wants to run a too high shell and be creative from that standpoint, like, where does Jamal fit longer term? Like, is he a linebacker in a couple years? Like, do we just lose the safety moniker altogether with him?
He might be. I mean, Bill Belichick doesn't really care about positions in that regard, right? He moves cornerbacks to safety to strong safety, dabbles with linebackers a little bit. In fact, he likes his linebackers to almost be safeties at time. And to your too high shell point, that's evolving because of the speed in the league right now, and it's so hard to maintain a cornerback with close coverage on a wide receiver like Tyreek Hill that can do a stutter step and be gone. So you're eliminating those big plays with a too high cover, but maybe again, Jamal's on the front end of this, and you don't get the time to run that anymore if he's breaking down passing lanes by adding an extra rusher, and you don't know whether whether he's dropping or going after the quarterback. So there could be some value here, but I just think that that's far too rich, and anyone getting a 15% pay bump over their next closest competition it's a lot to accept, especially in a hard cap situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have two defensive players now making essentially $18 million. I don't know what the incentives are for this particular deal, but if he hits them, he'll be making 18 average annual value. That's tough. And to not have either of those players be a coverage player. Now, granted, Bobby Wagner is a very good cover linebacker. It's why he's making that money. But to not have either of those players be a shutdown corner or a ball hawking safety,
or
tough.
Truly a pass rusher, because they're not on every play. So you're paying two guys that are dynamic in their own right, and maybe you're valuing that over a true set position, but his 9.5 sacks are going to be very dictated by what the offense gives him versus somebody like an Aaron Donald, which I know we're talking about completely different salaries at this point, but he's able to impact every single play. And you can always run away from either strong side, weak side linebacker, or whichever side of the field Jamal lines up on. And it's the ability to take them out of the play is the reason that it's tough to pay $36 million between the two of them for their services.
Yeah, I completely agree. The other thing that kind of stood out to me here is we talked about a couple episodes ago how Russell Wilson had mentioned that he would restructure his deal to accommodate these guys. Obviously, that did not happen. Not needed. So no. So Russell will, he gets to stake claim that he, made an effort for the team, but ultimately still gets his ability to push his way out of Seattle next year should things go south.
Well, maybe Dwayne Brown needs the money. Maybe he's looking for way more than we think he is. But just the last note here, I think, is there's got to be a couple people that are super happy about that in Marcus May, Marcus Williams, and then Tyrann Mathieu, who already made a little stink on Twitter out of this, because again, now you get to have this argument that this is the average annual value, and this is the guaranteed money, and he's a safety, I'm a safety, and especially someone like Tyrann Mathieu, who already does have that kind of dynamic skill set, right? The like Troy Polamalu, he's there to make plays, ball out. He's just instinctual, and says, is that more valuable than 9.5 sacks? Because you can pay other people to rush the football
to get the quarterback.
I'm going to be on the ball all the time. So,
yeah. Where do you think he'll ultimately are those guys going to push ahead of Adams, or is this kind of the cap, at least from
I think this is the cap.
value?
I think this is kind of like the Mahomes contract, where they got out ahead and set the bar, and they set the bar so much higher that all the other teams should actually be thankful that they don't have to have these conversations and say, okay, I'm not paying you more than Mahomes. I'm not paying you more than Jamal Adams, because you know what their argument's going to be? You're a safety. He's not a safety. He's a linebacker. We didn't have to go through the grievance aspect of this when he was franchise tagged as a safety, ultimately to become a linebacker and make that $18 million. So that's what the rest of the league can be thankful for, is that they set the contract something that no one else will need to reach. And I think it's going to be incremental over Simmons at this point, rather than trying to cap Jamal.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good call. Justin Simmons was the highest paid safety in the league for about a minute. And that's usually how this stuff goes.
Usually how it goes, but it's not usually that drastic of a jump when it goes to the next contract, right? Usually it's again incremental, and you say, okay, you get $201 more than he does, right? And it's the Price is Right rules here, where you just flip the middle finger to the guy to your left or right. Not something that's completely completely changing the scope of that landscape. But I think that they ultimately, everyone else will get to fall back on the fact that you aren't a linebacker, you're a safety, and Jamal is a unique situation. And I'm not confident it's going to play out long term because you kind of need some pass rush on every play to be able to have him be as effective as he has been.
Also, doesn't that style of play just generally lend itself to more wear and tear on your body?
Yeah.
If you're going to be.
Yeah. And we actually talked through some PFF statistics this weekend, and it heavily negates bad plays. And so it's very possible that, as much as that, again, splash play is great, the being burned for a 50-yard TD over the top is not going to be great, and it's not going to be a good look for the Seahawks. So it's that balance, and that's why I always err on the side of consistency. Right.